Hi, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another of the TFA webinars. We're back after what I think probably has been an indifferent summer, certainly weather-wise for most people, but hopefully not an indifferent harvest for people. So welcome back. This is the first of our autumn/winter webinars, and thank you very much for joining. We're very fortunate once again to have Janet Hughes, who's attended, I think this will be the third that we've seen, or maybe fourth even, third certainly, fourth maybe, that Janet's here. A lot of you will know and have come across Janet, who heads up the Future Farming Programme, and very apt that she's here with the movement that we're seeing on SFI currently, which will obviously be a key focus of this evening's discussion. We're also joined by Maureen Hardiman, who's the RPA Customer Director. Maria's been with the RPA since the beginning of the year, and it's a pleasure to have her here. And it's really good to have someone both from DEFRA and the RPA in the same room, which is always a good thing to see, a coordination of that. And we've also got Lynette Steele, who many of you know is our policy advisor at the TFA, joining us as well this evening. So we should have a very good evening, hopefully. Before we get started, just a little bit of the usual admin. As many of you who've attended these before will know, we do record these webinars. If you don't hear it all or you want to go and revisit it at any time, please go onto our YouTube channel, or indeed it will be on our website. And if there are other members or indeed non-members that you think would find this interesting, please point them in that direction. Obviously, if they're non-members, maybe encourage them to join as well. So it will be recorded. We're also very grateful as ever to have a sponsor for the webinar program, which is Oxbury Bank. It says in my notes here that they're the new kids on the block, but it seems to me now that they've been on the block for quite a long time now. So perhaps they're not quite so new, although they were only founded in 2021. And hopefully by now, those of you that have been before will be familiar with Oxbury. They're certainly, from what I can see, starting to get some traction as both bankers, farmers and technologists, and the only bank that's 100% dedicated to serving farmers and food producers. And I think they are beginning to shake up a little bit the financial support for farming from the banking sector. So we're really pleased to have Oxbury on side and to support us with these series of webinars. And if you need to know more, please go and take a look on their website. I think it's a very good thing. So as I say, moving on now to what we're going to cover this evening. We're going to be talking about the 2023 SFI rollout for farmers in England. I'll be brutally honest and thought maybe a little bit earlier this month, certainly at the end of last month, I was beginning to worry that we weren't going to be talking about a rollout on the 27th of September, but I'm really pleased to say that we are, and there is some good movement, I think, happening, and Janet will hopefully update us on that. And in particular, we'll be trying to cover, which I think hopefully will be of interest to us tonight, how do we actually get involved with this? There's been a lot of detail about the options and what we can and can't do. But I think now it's how do we get involved, and I would really encourage people to take a look. So that'll be good. So I'm really pleased that we're not in that position of trying to change the title of this webinar. So I think Janet's probably especially pleased about that as well. So that's good. That's good to see. And sorry, I've jumped ahead slightly. Before we do get started, there are two little other messages I do want to just remind people of. One is we've got quite a lot of teaching webinars available on our website, which again I would encourage people to go and have a look at. And we cover them quite a lot in the e-newsletter, but you can go and look at them online and on our website. So please do that. And the second thing, which I need to cover very quickly, is we've been asked by the Land Workers Alliance, who are going to do a test and trials for the horticultural elms trial next year alongside DEFRA, called Growing the Goods. This is particularly relevant for obviously people in the horticultural sector, The trial is running between November 23 and March 24, and they are specifically looking for 12 to 16 tenant growers, ideally within Lincolnshire, Cambridge, or the neighbouring counties, to work alongside them. They're anticipating it's about 6.5 days work, to include workshops and some working from home, and they will pay £200 a day to take part. If you want more detail about that, it's on our eBytes. I think it's on our webpage as well. But please, if you do want any more information about that, and I would encourage you to get involved, the test and trials program has been good, I think, on the Elm stuff. It's really helped to teach them a lot. So sorry for jumping ahead of myself and getting ahead of myself about what we were doing this evening. But anyway, without further ado, let's crack on. As I said, we're pleased to be joined by Janet Hughes, Marie Hardiman, and Lynette. We're going to start off initially with Lynette, who's going to run us through some of the results that we've had from this survey that many of you will have participated in around Elms and the programme. Janet will then give us some update again on operationally around the programme, and Marie will help about how the RPA are supporting what we're doing going forward. But we really do want to use this evening as a Q&A session, so please put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, I think, maybe at the top of some people's, but it's certainly on your screen somewhere. And without further ado, we'll get cracking. So I'll hand over to Lynette to get us started.
Thank you very much, Mark. And yeah, as Mark said, thank you very much to everybody who took the time to fill in our 3-minute survey about the Sustainable Farming Incentive. We commissioned the survey to give us really a snapshot of where our members and the industry are currently on their thinking about the scheme, as DEFRA and the RPA, as Mark has said, cautiously roll out the scheme via the Expressions of Interest portal, which opened at the end of August. Over 260 farmers responded, which I think gives us a good snapshot view of the opinions out there currently about the scheme. So when we came to analysing the results, over 77% of respondents stated that they intended to enter the scheme, which is great news. Half of those intend to enter the scheme as soon as they're invited to, while 32% plan to enter towards the end of 2023 or into early 24. The survey actually coincided with the announcement from DEFRA that farmers in England, obviously SFI relates to England only, who have live agreements before the end of the year will receive an accelerated payment, which is 25% of the annual value of their agreement within the first month of the agreement going live. So if you basically get on board quickly, you'll get a payment in 23. More than 82% of respondents already have some or all of their land in another agri-environment scheme, whether that's environmental stewardship, countryside stewardship, or a previous SFI offering, which I think really demonstrates the appetite of the industry to encompass these schemes into their farming system. This figure will be really reassuring to Janet and her team, as SFI has been specifically designed to work alongside other environmental schemes. There is greater flexibility in the scheme to allow this, and obviously will then increase income generated from delivering environmental goods. The survey also shows that the additional features in SFI, which as TFA we've lobbied for since its conception, including the flexible start date, no landlord consent required, shorter term date, quarterly payment, and those less prescriptive requirements, have all been really well received by respondents. So it's really nice to see that our work there is really feeding through. As always, with these types of surveys, there's an opportunity at the end to add your additional comments. And thank you to everybody who did put some comments in at the end of the survey. The overwhelming theme here from respondents indicates there is a distrust towards DEFRA and the RPA's ability to properly administer the scheme. 30% of respondents who got all the way to the end to put these comments in cited that the early closure of the SFI 2022 scheme it has been a major concern with their trust in the future abilities of the scheme. This is really, deeply worrying for us, and it must be an area that is of focus for improvement by the delivery teams within DEFRA and the RPA. And that means, that's great news for us this evening that Janet and Marie are here to address those concerns, because these ladies are the ones which are really heading up those teams. So hopefully we can have a really good, robust discussion about that later. As a TFA, we're continuing to advise farmers and members to look at making applications into SFI 23. Which I'm assuming is why most of you are here this evening, to find out a bit more, or maybe you've already expressed an interest and you've got some specific concerns that you're hoping we'll be able to answer this evening. But we are also and continue to work really closely with Janet, Marie and their teams and DEFRA and the RPA to address these issues and highlight these issues that the survey have given us evidence of. As an organisation, we will continue to monitor the progress of the scheme and provide feedback to our members. However, now it really does feel like we're at a crunch point, and the farmers need to start to see payments for SFI 23 flowing freely once agreements are live. If this doesn't come to fruition in the next quarter, then there is definitely a strong case in calling for a pause in BPS reductions to ensure that all of us, all members and farmers, will not be financially disadvantaged by any scheme failures there are. And that's a line that TFA have said repeatedly now for the last month or so, that we will be calling for that if there is any problems in scheme operations. So yeah, that's the feedback from the survey. And as I say, thank you very much to everybody who took part. There's a full report on the TFA website if you want to take a look at it. And also, if anybody has any further comments, please do get in touch with me on the head office number.
Brilliant, thanks, Lynette. I think that's really useful, just to put a bit of context to, I think, what really reflects what we're hearing on the phones and what we're hearing when we're out and about, is that there is a real enthusiasm from members and farmers widely to get involved, but that's perhaps a little bit tempered by the concern about how will this actually be delivered, and does it actually fit my farming system. So I think the delivery of this is now absolutely critical to reassuring farmers who just genuinely do want to get involved. So I think there's some positive and there's some less positive news perhaps there. So but hopefully we're about to hear in the next 15 minutes how as Lynette helpfully put the pressure on by saying these two ladies here have got all the answers, that how we can get involved and reassure us that the delivery is going to work and we shouldn't have any concerns about that. So I'll hand over to Janet, if that's okay.
Thanks very much, and thanks ever so much for having us here this evening, for, Marie and I. For those who haven't met me, I'm Janet, as Mark has said, and I'm the director in DEFRA that's responsible for the programme that's taking England out of the Common Agricultural Policy. And that includes everything we're doing to phase out all of the policies and payments under the Common Agricultural Policy, including farm subsidy payments, and introduce new and improved ways to pay farmers to undertake improvements to the environment, as well as producing food and improving farm productivity. And what we're all about is supporting all of those things at once. We're not asking farmers to choose between food and environment. We're looking for actions that can support both food production and environment and climate outcomes, and also give every farm the opportunity to be profitable and to thrive in this new way of operating. So that's what we're all about. We're going to focus on SFI, particularly this evening, which I'm pleased to say is now open for applications. We did open it later than we planned. We said we were going to open in August, and we opened in September. I'm very sorry about that. We decided in August that we could see some adjustments that we needed to make to the system, which, if we didn't make them before we opened, was going to cause confusion and worry for people. And we thought it was much better to give it another couple of weeks so that we could sort those adjustments out, which we did, rather than have people coming in and applying and getting stuck for whatever reason. So we did delay launching by 2 or 3 weeks, and we're really sorry if that caused you stress, but we thought it was the right thing to do rather than sticking to the date and having something that we knew wasn't going to quite work for everybody as it should. But we sorted those issues and made those adjustments, and it is now open for application. And SFI this year, if you looked at it last year and you're still kind of not quite sure about it, for this year, Lynette has outlined some of the differences and some of the changes that we've made. And in particular, we've tried to make it much more flexible. So you can choose from the 23 actions available, you can choose which ones you want to do, where you want to do them, how much land you want to do them on, and you will get paid quarterly. And as Lynette said, for those who come into their agreement and start it by the beginning of December, you'll get your first quarterly payment in the first month of your agreement. So you'll apply. Once you accept your agreement, you will be starting, you can start on the first of the following month, and then you'll get your payment, your first payment in that month. And we're turning applications around pretty quickly. The reason we built this automated system that we then spent the extra time getting right is so that we can turn around applications for SFI within a couple of weeks or less, rather than several months, which is what it's taken historically to turn around countryside stewardship applications, as I'm sure you well know. And we think that's really worth the price, because that means you can apply, get your agreement processed, accept it, and then get started and start getting paid much more quickly than has ever been possible before. In terms of where we are, we have seen we've started to see applications coming in. We've had, as of this afternoon, we'd had 11,700 expressions of interest. So 11,700 farmers getting in touch to say they want to apply for SFI, and that's in just 3 weeks. And that's about 14% of all the eligible population in just 3 weeks. And that's well over 3 times as many as applied for SFI 2022 in the whole year. So we're really pleased to see that level of interest, and the survey that Lynette just talked through in terms of the level of interest among tenants is really encouraging, because as Lynette says, we've been working with Tenant Farmers Association for quite a long time now, trying to make sure that we optimize the scheme so that tenants can get access to it, which I know has been really difficult with schemes in the past because the agreement lengths have been too long. You've had to get landlord consent for everything that you want to do. Some of the actions aren't as suitable for tenants, whereas in SFI, it's a 3-year agreement. And actually, even if you're on a shorter FBT than that, or even a rolling 1-year FBT or a grazing license that operates like a tenancy, you can still come into SFI if you expect to have management control for 3 years, and then you can leave without penalty if you lose management control during that time. So hopefully what we're seeing in the survey and what we're seeing in our expressions of interest is showing us that we have got a scheme now that's much more attractive to tenants, which we're really pleased about, because tenants, of course, are a crucially important part of the sector, and we want to make sure you've got every opportunity to take part. Over a third of the expressions of interest that we've received are from farms that are either partly or fully tenanted. So we're seeing a good level of interest there, and we're really pleased to see it. We've invited in, so we've had just under 12,000 people register their interest to apply. We've invited more than 8,000 of those to apply already. So we're not hanging about. We are getting people in as quickly as we can. And at the moment, we're working to just increase the speed with which we can do that. So you express your interest, and you should hear from us in the not too distant future, inviting you to apply. And then we've already started seeing applications come in. We've had a few hundred applications already, and we've already set our first agreements live. We've already had the first agreements issued and accepted by farmers. So we've got a few who will be starting at the beginning of October. For most people, they won't have quite had time to get around to applying and then accepting their agreement before then, but it should follow pretty quickly after that. So having had our delay at the beginning, we are now cracking on, and we're getting people in, which we're really pleased to see. What's going to happen next is we'll keep working on speeding up the time between expressing your interest and being able to apply. We're carrying on any issues that you find, anything that's not clear, anything that's not quite working as you expected. We're really keen to hear that. And Lynette in particular has been very active and will, I'm sure, continue to be in telling us what she's hearing about, along with others. And that's really helpful to us. And our teams are on it all the time, just tweaking things and making sure that they're really clear and workable for everybody. And we're all about continuous improvement in our team. So we really want to hear about it if something's not quite working as you expected it to do, or something's not quite clear for you, or what have you. And Marie's going to talk through a bit more about how you apply and where you can get support when I hand over to her in a second. So we're going to speed up that process. We'll keep the expression of interest process in place for now, because it allows us to see who's coming in and make sure that we can give everybody the experience that they're looking for, and do that in an orderly way. And then at some point in the next bit of time, we'll remove that bit of the process and everyone will be able to just access the service directly online. In terms of what's going to happen next, beyond that, there'll be the 23 actions, as I said, in this year's offer. There'll be more coming next year. We published something in January setting out what was the full list of things we're going to pay for in our schemes and how much we're going to pay for them. 2 things are outstanding there. One is that there were about 30 things that are new, which we hadn't worked up in full detail at that stage, and we'll publish all of the details of those within the next couple of months to set those out for you. And that includes some of the agroforestry offer, the more additional moorland options that we're going to offer, various peatland restoration options, and plenty of other things too. So that detail will be coming out at the end of this year and then be available to you next year. And then the other thing that was outstanding from there is how we're going to remove the complexity that we currently have between countryside stewardship, mid-tier, and SFI, where running those 2 things alongside each other, we know is making life more complicated than it needs to be for farmers. And so what we're looking to do is make it much easier for you to see the entire offer across mid-tier and SFI in one service, through a much more straightforward application process and a much more straightforward way to manage different options and agreements. And we'll make a leap on that next year, and then we'll carry on making further leaps forward in that in the next 2 or 3 years to just keep making things simpler and clearer and faster for all of you. And we're also, very importantly, trying to make it more flexible and fairer. And we know that one of the reasons for mistrust, exactly as has come out in your survey, is because we've had failures in the past on delivery. And you'll all remember the CAPD situation and previous attempts to fix mapping, and earlier than that, the problems we had in the early 2000s. And we're all very, very well aware of that. We know how important it is to build your trust and how difficult that is if you've had a bad experience. But the other element of trust and confidence is about us operating controls for the scheme in a way that's fair and proportionate and supportive and pragmatic. And Marie will say a little bit more about what we're doing there, but the flexibility we're introducing has to go hand in hand with fair and reasonable and proportionate controls. It's no good having a flexible scheme if an inspector is going to turn up and fine you if you haven't followed our top secret rules, of which there aren't any. So it's very important those 2 things go hand in hand, and we'll say a bit more about that, no doubt, in the questions and answers. And we're very much aware of the need to make sure that this is actually goes smoothly now, and we are, Marie and I and everyone we work with, are absolutely devoting our energies to making sure that that's true. And when we find an issue, we fix it as quickly as we can, and we try and make sure everything goes smoothly. And we know that it's really important that we make the payments that we've said we're going to make, and that we do that on time. And we did do that in SFI 2022, but we are now looking at a larger scale, and we know that eyes are on us to make sure that we don't mess this up. And we feel that very deeply and personally, because we owe it to all of you. If you're taking the leap of faith of taking part in this, then we owe it to you to fulfill what we've promised to do. So we take that very seriously. And no doubt you'll all hold us to account if we fail, which we will certainly not do if we can possibly avoid it. And we don't think we will. We've got good confidence now that the ways we're working and the things that we're putting in place are good, and our ability to pick up issues is good and deal with them. So very much looking forward to hearing the questions this evening and answering them as best we can. We can follow up afterwards, as we always do, if we don't manage to cover everything. And also, could not be easier to find on the internet if you want to follow up afterwards, and we'll put some contact details in the chat so that if you want to follow up, you're more than welcome if you don't fancy asking in front of everybody. But thanks again to all of the TFA members, and particularly to George and Lynette and Mark for all of the contributions that you've made to help us get to this point, and the work that you do to help us make these schemes work for farmers, because if they don't work for farmers, then they don't work at all. So it's absolutely critical that we carry on working together in that way.
Brilliant. Thanks, Janet. And yeah, it's good to hear that you are getting some really quite significant numbers in a relatively short space of time. And perhaps more importantly, that significant number of EOIs, expressions of interest, is getting turned into invitations fairly quickly, because I think it would be fair to say, and I'll be brutally honest here, I was quite sceptical of that possibly happening. So that's very good to see. So Marie, do you want to just add a little bit to what Janet has said, and then we'll go for some Q&A?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And hello, everyone. Lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me. As Mark said at the start of the call, I joined the Rural Payments Agency in April this year. So I think a perfect time, really. I got a great summer of intros, and TFA in particular were great in meeting with me and providing loads of insight and feedback. So it's been really good to be involved from the start, really, of SFI 23. I think just a little bit to add to Janet's, because we're so passionate, we'll talk forever, as Mark knows, in the sessions we've been in recently. So I don't want to eat into the Q&A time. But I think you talked a little bit about trust, and particularly lack of trust. So part of my role as customer director, and one of the things we're really keen to do, is set up as many ways as we can to hear your voices, hear the feedback from our customers, to get that real insight, so that we can keep improving, listen, learn, iteratively change our systems, our processes, to make it as easy for farmers and land managers as we can. So some of you may have already been contacted, as well as the survey that Lynette talked about. RPA colleagues have been contacting customers who've started their SFI 23 applications to complete surveys. Having those one-to-one calls with the specialist SFI team to support people through the application process as much as we can. Some of the feedback that we've had already has influenced, changes to guidance, us getting some videos and some clarification comms out, really trying to engage with individuals and looking at all of our farming groups. So just to add to the figures that Janet was giving you on our expressions of interest and applications, got a really broad mix. It's been really great. There was some challenge some weeks ago around, are we only going to invite BPS only customers, maybe those easy sort of groups of farmers. And actually we're seeing a really fab spread, including our SFI 2022 customers, customers with combinations of countryside stewardship, ES, SFI, and BPS, of course. So that's been really positive for us, and that gives us a real understanding of the complexities and the different things that we can do to make this as simple as possible. You touched a little bit, Mark, and I think Janet mentioned, on the role of our field officers, previously known as inspectors, and it's really, really important that that role and the culture within our field function moves away from maybe what some of our EU funded schemes lended towards, was that sort of police and punish and enforce, and actually move into much more of a support and prevent. So when field officers are coming out to see you, it's looking at the flexibility that we're designing these schemes to allow, and understanding how best to advise and guide people. And if things are not quite right, spotting that early enough and using the insight and intelligence that we have to spot things early enough and support people to get back on track, so that you can deliver those amazing outcomes that we're looking for. So that's a really important part of my role, is to enable that transition, if you like. So it'd be good to hear feedback on that, and if there are any more detailed questions on that, happy to get involved. That probably gives a really good overview, unless there's anything specific that Lynette or Mark you wanted me to cover in the intro.
I think that's useful, Marie. I think the key is the reassurance that things are going to be delivered. Clearly, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So as we put our applications in and we start to receive our money, we will know whether that's working or not. So we can sit here and say it's going to be brilliant, but the proof of the pudding will be when it is actually delivered. I don't know, Marie, whether you have the answer to this, but just on the subject of field officers, are you calling them now? Did you say field officers, not inspectors?
Not inspectors.
Okay, field officers. Presumably, with SFI 22 getting up and running, and also your pilot schemes, you've had a number of these visits done already. do you have a flavour of how the feedback that has had to try and reassure people that actually there has been a change of attitude? I'm thinking of feedback from farmers that have experienced that.
Yeah, so mixed. There's been some real positive examples of where people have been genuinely surprised at the support, guidance that they've received. Equally, we've had feedback from people who have said, I'm fearful, I dread the visit, I want it over as quickly as possible, and I don't want them to come back ever again. And what we also recognise, and I've been involved in a number of Q&A sessions at various shows throughout the summer. As you all see more of me, you'll see that both Janet and I are transparent and as honest as we can be. There are some people who have found they're not seeing a shift in culture. And my answer to that would be, it's going to take us some time. So if you think for a while, we've recruited people with that enforcement skill set, that's been their career, and that's what they're used to delivering for us. We're now asking them to deliver a different role. We've got a cohort of people that were probably already in that mindset and absolutely went out to inspect with the view of, how can I help you? How can we get this right? You've got a group who are saying, really on board with this, can't wait to get started, but I need a bit of help and support in doing that. And then you'll have a cohort where for years and years they've worked in that enforcement role, and that's going to take a bit of time and support to get them to shift that approach. We recognise that, and we're doing everything we can to move that culture forward. So we really welcome feedback from farmers on how those visits are going. And as I say, there's already been that people actually come and sort me out. It's remarkable what happens when you put an RPA fleece on at a show. But people actually came and sort me out to say, I had a visit and I was surprised. That's brilliant. We are seeing that shift. We need more insight to understand how wide that's landing. But yeah, there's a genuine shift in our language as well, in how we're trying to issue more preventative, proactive communications to farmers to say, we know that you've got this option, or you've got this action in this agreement. This is what you need to be looking to do. So we're very much shifting to that, getting in there early and prevent, rather than waiting until things have happened and coming along to say, that's not right. And that's absolutely the way that we're moving the agency forward.
Well, I mean, I think that's good to hear that you are getting some positive feedback on that already, because that I think will help to, change people's attitudes significantly to what perhaps some of us will have experienced in the past. Yeah. So the quicker that happens, the better. So that's really good news. We've got, as predicted, we've got a lot of questions in the chat. I will absolutely guarantee that in the next 25 minutes, we will not answer all of them. So I apologise in advance to those of you that have put questions in that don't get answered. We will get answers from either Marie or Janet or both of them after they've been good enough to say they will answer these after the event, and they will be on our website. But I think let's just get cracking. We've had quite a lot of questions that we had prior to the event starting, but I can see on the chat tonight we've got some really good questions here, so I'm gonna just try and whiz through a few of these and probably make a pretty ham-fisted attempt at pulling some of them together, but I'll try and do that. Perhaps we could just start going on the expressions of interest, Janet. George Renner asks, who farms in the East Midlands, that how long do you expect it to take for all of those 12,000? He's added another 300 to your figure already. Expressions of interest to be able to access the application process. So what are we talking about here, Janet? Weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, days? What are you hoping?
Yeah, thanks for the question, George. I'm pretty sure I know George, so hello, good to see a question from you. I think what we said when we first opened for expressions of interest was that we would be in touch within 4 weeks. And for most of those people that have got in touch in that time, we have been in touch. If you haven't been invited yet, it's most likely because there's something particularly complicated about your situation. If you're at all worried about it, just ring the RPA and they'll be able to advise you. In general, we're turning them around within depending on your particular circumstances, very quickly. If you're only in BPS and you're not in a scheme at all, it takes a little bit longer if you're in another scheme, but we are working through them, as you can tell by the fact that we've issued more than 8,000 already. We don't think it's going to take much longer to get through all of them and get to a position where we're turning them around day by day. The only situation where that wouldn't happen would be if there's something particularly complicated about your case. But if you're worried and if you've been waiting longer, then do just contact the RPA and ask them what's going on, and they'll be able to help you.
And do you anticipate that to be that sort of 2 to 3 weeks? I think you kind of intimating that. Do you anticipate that to be sort of rolling at that level for the next couple or 3 months? Or I guess it depends a little bit on the expressive interest, or do you think it will get quicker?
It depends what happens. It'll get quicker, and it already is getting quicker for some people in some cohorts. But it depends what we find as we roll it out. So at the moment, what we're doing is checking every single agreement before we issue it. RPA colleagues are, to make absolutely certain that it's all as it should be. We don't create any complexity or confusion for farmers. And we'll do that for at least another 2 or 3 weeks. Once we get to the position of not needing to do that, and not feeling like that's important, we can reduce the number of checks that we do. We'll also start reducing the requirement to express your interest, but we'll do that in a way that is best serves getting as many people in as quickly as possible with the minimum amount of hassle. That's what we're trying to do. Marie, I don't know if you want to add anything to what I've just said there on that.
I was just going to add that, just to give you a bit of a flavour of all of the expressions of interest that came through. So yesterday, for example, we had just over 400. We invited in over 600. So we're inviting more. It's not like, there's a big backlog of expressions of interest. And actually the invitations are not just one cohort. So just to give some reassurance, of the 8,000 invitations issued, nearly 4,000 are BPS only. We've had just shy of 3,000 with the Countryside Stewardship Agreement, over 1,000 with SFI 22. So, there's a real mix there. So yeah, absolutely, we're inviting in every single day. Okay,
that's good to hear, because that suggests it is going to get quicker, obviously, if my back of a fag packet maths was any good there for your answer. Just perhaps it's just connected to expression of interest. Michael Summers asks, what would the reason be for an expression of interest not being accepted? Which is quite a good question, I think. I'm not sure we know the answer.
I mean, the obvious one is where the person's not eligible, so they haven't got BPS claim agreement. Also, we are seeing somewhere, it's just data error. People are not putting their SPI number in accurately, and it just takes us a bit of time to try and identify that. We'll try our best to locate the person, but that is the only reason if we're not able to identify the farm that it relates to.
Okay, so if it's a genuine expression of interest without a sort of admin error, there's pretty much no reason why you wouldn't get invited in at some point.
Even for people with the most complex, people with common or shared grazing agreements, SFI 22, we still receive that expression of interest and we get in touch.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I guess slightly connected to that. Well, two things slightly connected to that. George had a supplementary question, was what happens if the budget's all spent? I don't know, Janet, if you could very quickly answer that.
Yes, I can. So the situation with the budget for SFI is that the cost of the agreements that are entered into this year will count in next year's budget. And there is currently no restriction on what individual farmers can do in SFI and no restriction on how many farmers can take it up. And what ministers have said publicly is, if you take it up in bigger numbers than we've allowed for, then that is an excellent problem to have. Please give me that problem. So that's what Mark Spencer, the farming minister, has said publicly, and that's what he's asked me to do and Marie to do, and that's what we're doing. So have at it, crack on and get involved. But if you want to be guaranteed entry, crack on and get in. That would be my advice on that.
I think that's your answer, George, is get in and spend as much money as you can. Thanks for that. Just a slight, well, similar thing. I'm going to concentrate a little bit on operational stuff if those listening and all of us doing this don't mind, rather than specifics of individual options for a bit, because I think that there's quite a lot of theme to those questions. This is a question that's close to Lynette's heart, I know. Alan Hutton asks, currently all the information on SFI is online. Most farmers are age 60 plus and are not all that computer literate. What is the option for somebody who doesn't have online access to get onto this? Because there is a significant minority of people, and I know Lynette's asked this question on numerous meetings that I've been at when she's been there. So Lynette, here you go. It's your big moment.
So
Well, I'll throw that over to Marie. I've been given the.
No, I didn't mean for you to answer it, Annette. You've got someone else on the case here. So yeah, it's a very serious point, though. It's a very serious point, you know. So what is the option here? Because everything is online at the moment, as far as I'm aware. So perhaps you could just cover that, could you?
And it is a digital only application process, but we do appreciate that we need to provide assisted digital support. So where farmers and landowners aren't able to access online, they call the RPA. They will be digitally assisted. So the RPA will complete as much as they can on their behalf. Will then send out whatever they need to in paper form for it to be read, agreed to, and sent back. But yeah, there is no, there's no magic answer for you. There's not, hard copy book that we will be posting out. It is very much, we will support that via the phone. And also we will look to support getting online. So if that is, there are various support mechanisms for broadband capability and supporting people on how to do so next time they feel more confident. But yes, it is very much digital by default, but recognising from an accessibility point of view, we need to provide other options. That would be call the RPA, they will talk you through things and guide you through that process.
Okay, so the follow-on question was the guidance in paper form? I think you said there isn't. Is that correct?
That is correct. There is no paper form.
Okay, so the answer currently for anybody who's not online is to contact the RPA by phone, and you will be able to guide them through how they might be able to put an application in, or put an application in kind of for them. Yeah. Okay. Exactly. Thank you for that, Marie. There's a couple of questions about here about business structure. So if I could just pull these together. Hannah Hatsmith asks, would an SFI started under the partnership of one party be transferable to another? So in their specific situation, the parents are farming in partnership. Her and her sister may be required to take the tenancy on, obviously, sometime during that 3-year period. So how would that be dealt with, and are they able to apply? There's another question around ownership. Catherine Paulson asks whether you could just explain a little bit about what happens to an SFI agreement if land is sold or transferred. So I know they're quite specific, but obviously does depend on the answer as to whether someone could apply here, I think.
Yeah, so the general rule is that if you're applying for SFI, you should expect to have management control of the land for the duration of the agreement. And if you transfer or sell the land, normally you wouldn't transfer the agreement, you would end your agreement, and then the people taking it on could start a new one. However, there were recommendations coming out of the ROC review that we should look at this, and this is something that's on our kind of backlog of things to look at to see is there something different we should do in future, but I'm just answering as to how it is now. The rules say that we wouldn't usually allow a transfer. In terms of the specific person asking about their case, what I recommend there is that they contact RPA to talk through Hannah, to talk through the specifics of their case and see what the best option is there, because I wouldn't like to give out generic advice on a specific case. In general, you can't usually transfer, but I would want you to talk to an advisor about that to get particular advice on your particular case.
Okay, thank you. Probably quite a short answer on this one, but quite a good question. I think Paul Crawley asks, is it possible to choose a start date for SFI? So his specific example is he might want his to start on the 1st of January because of current CS options or CS obligations. I guess that's a valid question. Could I put an application in now and I want it to start on the 1st of March? Is that possible? And if so, how would we do that?
It is. And what you do is you can do your application whenever you want, and then you'll be sent your agreement, and you will start the month after you accept your agreement. So if you don't want it to start yet, sit on it and accept it the month before you want it to start. Okay. That would be the recommended approach there.
Perfect. Thank you. Just moving on, we've not really covered SFI 2022 much, partly because there was obviously smallish numbers of people, but it is relevant for those of us, I'm in one, who are in one. Elizabeth, and I'm going to add in another question here, but Elizabeth Fearon asks, why do you have to complete her 2022 SFI before they can apply for a 23 agreement? Perhaps I could just broaden that out a little bit as to what is the process for people in 22 to get into 23. And also add as a supplementary to that, because Amanda Barker asks, because she's in a pilot scheme, and it appears to be excluded from some of the options that are now available. Do they have the option also of ending a pilot scheme early in order to get into a 23 agreement? So I guess we're talking about 22 agreement holders and pilot scheme agreement holders being kind of excluded from the current process. I'm not sure they are actually excluded, but perhaps could you just talk through the process that people would need to go through, Janet, on that?
Yes, very much so. So one of our very important rules here is that people who are already in schemes, whatever they may be, must not be disadvantaged by things that then happen later. So when we redesigned SFI for 2023, one of our important priorities was that anybody who'd already come into the scheme mustn't be at a disadvantage relative to those coming into the new offer. And that's why we decided to terminate all the 2022 agreements, because we thought if we allowed them to carry on, people in those agreements would be restricted as to what they could do in the new scheme, and they wouldn't be able to take advantage of the full flexibility on offer. So that's why we've terminated the agreements. We realise it's inconvenienced people having to switch across, but we thought it was better to be upfront about that and rip the plaster off now. And we have made sure that nobody in 2022 agreements will miss out financially. So anything that you were being paid for in 2022 that you can't now be paid for in 23, of which there are 2 or 3 things, you will be paid what you should have got for that over your 3 years, so that you don't lose out. In terms of applying for 2023, we know that there are folk who are in 2022 agreements who want to transfer across before the end of their agreement. So we've served 6 months notice because that's what the contract says we need to do for terminating your agreement. And we know we said in our very initial communications about this, we know that there'll be people who want to move earlier because they want to get access to that wider range of options. If you're in that category, the thing to do is register your interest. And we are inviting people in 2022 to apply now. And then you'll have a conversation with the RPA about how you can manage that transfer from one to the other. And you won't need to wait till the end of your agreement to do that, but you need to have a conversation with the RPA about when's the right time for you to do it, depending on your particular circumstances. So the steps are: register your interest if you haven't done so already, start your application, have a conversation with RPA about what your options are in terms of when you can move from one to the other. And in terms of the pilot, you can stack SFI options on top of the pilot. You can come out of the pilot if you want to go into other schemes, and there are folk who have done that. In terms of switching individual options, I don't think that's possible, but I could be wrong about that. So the person who asked that question, I would recommend contact the RPA to get a definitive answer about that, because it depends on exactly what it is that you want to do, how we can facilitate that. But we're obviously keen to facilitate people in the pilot coming into the main scheme, and we're really pleased that that's the direction people want to go in, because that suggests that we have learned the right things from the pilots and we are making the main scheme better. So we really want everybody in the pilot to have a good experience where they are, contribute to our learning, which they've done massively, and they've really helped us to develop the main scheme, and then have a smooth ride into the main scheme as their SFI pilot agreement ends, but also be able to take advantage of the things that they want to alongside the pilot agreement. So that's what we're trying to achieve. If you've got any kind of concern about that in your individual case, give the RPA a ring.
And am I right in saying, Janet, Marie, you'll know the answer to this as well, I guess, that as a 22 agreement holder registering an expression of interest, you need to do that through the email that will have received from the RPA, not on the website? Is that correct?
We have now put the link on the portal. So
okay.
In the Royal Payments portal. But yes, we also emailed, or if you haven't got an email address, wrote to SFI 22 customers earlier this week, clarifying that, because there have understandably been some confusion in letters sent around terminating the agreement, then the launch of SFI 23. So just clarifying, complete your EOI, your expression of interest, and then RPA colleagues will be in touch. And as Janet said, we have already, let's have a look, off the press figures. Yeah, over 1,000, over 1,100 invitations issued now to SFI 22 customers.
Okay, so that's nearly half, actually.
Yeah.
And that's most of those who've said they want to move. And anybody who's expressed interest and hasn't, that'll be because their case is more complicated, because they've got lots of other agreements as well, or some other circumstance.
Right. Okay. That's great. Thank you. I think hopefully that clarifies a bit of those two questions. So that's great. I'm going to move on a little bit, or perhaps a little bit. It's not really option related entirely, but it's kind of related. David Parrish asked, who said, I've established a cover crop hoping to have registered before in order to claim on the SAM2, the cover crop one. The crop is now in the ground, but he still hasn't been invited to participate. Will he be able to claim when he has the opportunity to register? I think this is quite important just to clarify the answer to this. I'm not going to jump the gun and give the wrong answer, but I think I might know this one. But anyway,
you do, because we've talked about it, and the answer is in SFI. If you've already got the thing in the ground, that's fine. We'll still pay you for it, so that's fine. If you've got your crop in already, that's fine. Once you get into the agreement, that will count towards your agreement.
And I think that's really important and good in lots of ways, and should reassure people who have been looking at what the options have been since they were released in January and thinking about doing it, and now a critical time of year is here, that actually it doesn't mean they have to stop and not do anything.
No, not at all. Crack on.
So that's great. And can I just perhaps ask between the pair of you to answer? We had a number of questions come in ahead of the webinar around those people who have got a CS agreement or a mid-tier agreement or an ES agreement, and how the system sort of works and knows that they've got that. A few questions about, can I apply for SFI even though I've got a mid-tier scheme? So can reassure people around that. And also perhaps what the process is for those people that have applied for CS this year, so applied to start on the 1st of January, but now want to apply for SFI as well, and how that might work, and just reassure that they're not going to get themselves in a tangle, because that is a potential, I think. So yes, just a little bit of reassurance around ES, CS, mid-tier and so on.
Yeah. So in the SFI handbook, it sets out which actions from different schemes you can combine on exactly the same area as land as SFI actions. And you can also combine different actions from different schemes in the same parcel on different bits of the parcel. So for instance, you might have a margin in countryside stewardship already, but you might want to do a cover crop in the middle of the field through SFI. And we've done a lot of work to make that straightforward for farmers. So if you're in the CS already, then when you log into SFI, you will see your CS actions in the fields, and it will tell you what you can do either on top of them or next to them in those same parcels. That also applies if you've applied for countryside stewardship to start on the 1st of Jan 24. As long as you've submitted your application, it will show up in the SFI system. If you've not submitted a CS application yet for some reason, and you're in the very final stages of finishing it off, then it won't show up yet. So if there are a few cases where we're still working with folk to finish those applications off, and you do need to finish your CS one before we can see it in the SFI system. So you do need to kind of finish one and then start the other in terms of the application process. But otherwise, you can stack them on top of each other. This is what I was talking about earlier, though, which is this is a piece of complexity that you don't need because you've got enough on your plates. And so what we wanted to do with SFI is get it up and running, prove the concept, get it working, and get it kind of adopted at scale and get the design right, which we think we're now well on the way to doing. And then we'll next year start streamlining the two, so that you don't have to do this, apply for one and then apply for the other, but instead you can see it all in one place and you can manage it all in a much more straightforward way. And that'll include being able to add things into your agreements, being able to manage multiple agreements if that's what you're doing, etc. So, but for now, you can stack one on top of the other, and the system will show you what it is that you can do on each bit of land, depending on what you've got in any other agreement.
Okay, that's really useful. I think it's really reassuring, and I can perhaps from experience confirm that if you have got a CS agreement, and you certainly this worked with 22, and where that land wasn't eligible, and it did work, so that's reassuring. But I think can I just clarify what you said about people, Janet, that have made an application in this current year? Mm-hmm. Presumably that's been submitted because the closing date was the 15th of September or 18th of
yes.
September. So as it's been submitted, if I now wanted to put an SFI application in, that what I've submitted under my CS wouldn't be eligible for my SFI currently.
Well, It depends whether, because some CS options you can stack on top of SFI options, and vice versa. But it will show up in the system. It will what you've put into your application for CS will show up in the SFI system, and it will tell you what SFI options you can stack on top of it, which ones you can put next to it, and which ones aren't eligible because you've already got them in CS. So, for instance, if you've applied to do a buffer strip in CS, you can't then apply to do another buffer strip in SFI on the exact same bit of land, because that would mean we'd be paying you twice for the same thing. And so that wouldn't be eligible, but you might be able to do a nutrient management option on top of it, for example. Okay,
thank you. I'm really conscious, as ever, we're running out of time and we're not getting around the questions, but we'll keep pursuing this. Again, I'm going to stick to the kind of operational stuff. Apologies to those people who've asked specific option things, but we will get answers to these and we will come back to you on them. But a good one here from Tessa Herbert, who asks, are new entrants eligible? I think we kind of answered that with the BPS bit, but if you could perhaps give a little bit more background to that and as and when they will be able to get in, because I think that's really critical at this moment.
Yeah, and that's relevant to Rebecca Lawton's question as well, actually, about farmers growing less than 5 hectares. So at the moment, in order to come into SFI this year, you need to be eligible for BPS, which means you'll need more than 5 hectares and you'll need to have some entitlements. Obviously, BPS payments are going to be delinked next year. And we also want to let in farmers who have got less than 5 hectares. So from next year, you won't have those restrictions and you'll be able to come in. You can already go into countryside stewardship if you've got less than 5 hectares and you're not a BPS claimant. So we'll be extending that to SFI essentially. And we won't be able to use BPS as a basis anymore because we won't be having BPS claims in that way.
So, sorry, Janet, are you saying
new entrants? Sorry, to answer directly to the question, if you're a new entrant and you've got some BPS entitlements that came with your new entry, then you could come in. If you don't have any BPS entitlements at the moment, then you wouldn't be able to come in. But look out for next year as we start extending eligibility beyond those who claim BPS.
Okay, so as a new entrant, if you don't have BPS entitlement, you can't come in currently. Yeah. But you're hoping that they would be able to come in 24 without making a problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if not, and what they definitely can do is go into countryside stewardship. Obviously, they can't do that now this year round because unless they've done it already. But that is already the case for countryside stewardship, and what we're talking about is extending that to SFI.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Mark, don't mind me just jumping in there. I probably recommend for anybody taking on new land or a new tenancy that they just get the paperwork in order now. So make sure the fields are transferred, they're set up with the RPA as customers, so that when that becomes an option, they can enter straight away. Especially, new tenants going in and old tenants leaving. It's important to get that transfer done as soon as possible.
Yeah, no, really good point on that. Yeah. Another, again, operational one, more about triple SIs. Ben Mortimer asked, how long does it take to get permission to get SFI on a triple SI? What is the situation with that kind of, where we've got those derogations?
So it would be Natural England that would deal with that permission. In order to start your SFI agreement, you need to have kicked off that process, but it doesn't need to have concluded. So NE would let RPA know that you've been in touch and you've kicked off that process, and then you'd be able to start your SFI agreement. In terms of how long it takes, I think that would depend on your case and which triple SI it is and how long it takes Natural England to do it. And we don't have Natural England here this evening, but what it won't do is hold up you starting your SFI agreement. So crack on and apply. Okay. You will need to go and get the consent before you do the actions in accordance with the rules around triple SI consent.
And you need the consent from NE before you sign and return your application.
No, you need to have you can sign and return your application, and then NE will let the RPA know when you've kicked off the consent process. You don't have to wait for it to have been concluded.
Yeah.
So RPA will issue your agreement once that process has been kicked off. Marie, do you want to in any way clarify what I've just said?
Understanding too, as long as you've begun that process of getting consent.
Yeah, Marie said as long as you've begun the process. For anybody who doesn't know Marie as well as I do and couldn't hear her very well.
Okay. And we'll just wrap up, because I've seen this sort of it's not quite put as a question, but I know it is a question from Michael Summers, because I do see that and I've seen a little bit of correspondence over the last few weeks about mapping hedges. Michael asks it in a mapping hedges discuss. Hopefully it's not a leap of faith. I think what we're driving at here is there is some chat, if I could call it that, around mapping issues and when is a hedge and that kind of thing. It might be one for you, Marie, this to maybe the first starting point would be just to reassure people what they must do before they're making an SFI application with regards to maps and hedges and that kind of thing.
Definitely, what's really, really crucial is going on and checking that the information we hold about your land is accurate. So updating the maps and getting that process kicked off. It isn't an immediate turnaround. So people talk about RLE1s, which I now know what that means. So there is a turnaround time of up to 10 days to get that land change completed. So yeah, I would encourage everybody to go online and check your maps, and if there's a change that you need to submit that now while you're working out what you might want to apply for in SFI 23.
Okay, perfect. And with regard to hedges, I'm not sure quite what the position is there. Do we need to know, do we need again check that the information on that you're holding about our hedges is correct or not? I'm not sure that's right, is it?
No, you don't. Not for hedges, because we know the hedgerow layer's got all kinds of issues in it. So for hedges, you simply tell us how much hedgerow you want to put in within each parcel. And you tell us how much there is, how many meters there are, because we know about the issues that you and others have told us about, that if we make everybody change all their hedgerow map layer and cause them to have some kind of aneurysm because of that, that's not going to be a great experience for everybody. So we're not doing it like that.
Brilliant, thank you. There you go, Michael. It's not a leap of faith at all.
He's playing back my language to me, and I didn't mean to be trite when I said a leap of faith, but I do think it is a leap of faith. If you're worried about things that have happened in the past and you're concerned about deliverability and whether you can really trust us to do what we say we're going to do, then it is a bit of a leap of faith, isn't it, to take part in a new scheme as it's being rolled out? And I think it's important to recognise that and respect it. So I'm not saying that because I think you're taking a massive risk, because obviously I don't think you are, but I can see why you would think you were, given all the history. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that, really.
Yeah, no, thanks, Janet. Okay, well, as ever, my timekeeping has been pretty shocking and we've gone past 8 o'clock. So apologies for those of you who've got dinner on the table at 8 or a glass of wine or something. But I think that's been a really useful session. So thanks again very much to Janet for attending yet again, and to Marie for coming along tonight. Really useful. As I said, it's great to see DEFRA and RPA in the same room. It really does help to get some of the questions answered. Thanks as ever to Lynette for helping out from a TFA point of view. Those of you that have come across Lynette will know that she's very much on the case with so much of this stuff, and it's really good to have that input into DEFRA and be able to influence what's going on. So thank you to all three of you very much for coming along this evening and helping out with the webinar. Just a quick reminder and a thank you, first of all, once again to Oxbury for sponsoring this evening and our autumn and winter series of webinars. The next one of which is on the 25th of October. And as an introduction to nature markets, we've got Helen Avery, who's the Director of Nature Programmes at the Green Finance Institute, coming to talk to us. Again, we're back on the theme of where are these nature markets, what do they have, how are they working? So I think, probably on the back of what we've learned tonight, again, quite a useful discussion. So if you're able to attend that will of course be recorded. So if you can't get on the 25th, you will be able to catch up with it. But thanks again to everybody for attending. I hope you found it a useful evening. Apologies for not answering all of the questions. As I say, we will get them answered and people will come back to you. So it's not a wasted question, but thank you very much for attending, and please, everybody, go and have a very good evening.